Hey, now we're live. Now we're live. Hello.
Live. Hello.
Howdy,
Good
howdy.
evening.
Live
Welcome
and
to
live.
Talking Bollocks. Yeah, I had to put that in there because Angela likes to hear a good swear at the start of every stream. So
It's true. When we are
She
doing
should have tuned in a few seconds earlier.
our vocal warm-ups that allow our lips to limp burn our vocal cords just to free up.
lip
Me, me,
trills.
me, me.
Oh, we're going the whole hog.
So
How are you all?
yeah, dude. It was Monday, so it was the first day at work.
It was crap, wasn't it? It was pretty crap.
I prefer stories to work. I prefer playing
Yes.
games to work.
I can
like
get
playing
behind
games
that
at
philosophy.
work.
I'm trying to get my work to be more inclined towards stories and playing games. I think because I can't get out of work.
The
So
problem with
maybe I
that,
could-
right, is that they wouldn't have to pay you for it. Isn't that a thing? I mean, work has to be shit, otherwise they wouldn't pay you to do it. You just do it.
Well, some people must get paid to do things they enjoy.
Mm,
Or is the act of doing something and getting paid for it sufficient to take the enjoyment right out of it?
I've heard that a lot. I have heard that. A lot of people have said that, yeah. It starts off as a hobby. As soon as you start getting paid for it.
Yeah. So is it better that we keep this as a hobby?
Oh, it's a little late now, isn't it?
No, well, yeah,
IMT is
technically,
definitely a thing.
it's
Yeah,
still,
that's true. That's
we're
true.
not earning any money from it.
Oh, that's
Nope.
also true.
That's it. Yeah. As soon as it becomes a job.
Point.
If we do a full economic costing of our expenditure, including yes, I wouldn't really do that because that's what I do for my work, and why would I bring that into my hobby?
Well, I'll tell you why.
Oh, here we go.
No, it's all right. Ah,
Yeah, so we're joined for something a bit different for Infinite Monkey Tales. We're going behind the curtain. We're breaking the fourth wall. We're talking about what goes on behind the scenes when games are run. We're looking at the things that aren't the games themselves, and we are going to turn this into a series. And they're going to be short. We're not going to be talking for more than an hour. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep it short. We might even be talking for less than that. But I have a sneaking suspicion that between the three of us, we're probably
it might go on a bit. Is that?
yeah. So we're probably We'll take it to 15:15 the next hour. Having just gone live on 2:15 now. Let's have a look at chat and see if anybody has found us on an unusual night.
I have. There's a few people.
I need to sort out Windows. One of the bugbears I have is when I go to my Windows and if I mouse over the mouse preview, it does that. It flashes, which is really irritating for people watching in chat and doesn't sit well with my production sensibilities, which somewhat delusions of grandeur. Okay, let me see if I can bring up chat. Where is chat? Where are you, chat? Yeah, no, you're not
Come
there.
on. Don't be shy.
There's
Kind of
chat.
hiding there.
Hey, I can say hello to people. Hey Jade, how's it going? Hey Strain, hello. Minerva, hello. Got over the character death yet? Not left her bed. It was all my fault.
Yeah.
The Infinity,
It was
hello.
murder.
Was murder.
That's what it was.
Yeah. So, guys, it's all. You live in a desert, Jade. That's
Say it's going hot.
But-
It's always hot, right?
Yeah. The Infinati.
Hey, Roy.
Pants, rants, and tight pants. Not today, guys. Not today. We're sitting down.
It was earlier.
Comfy
Yeah,
jeans.
I did. I have to admit, I did only catch a few seconds of your stream as I jumped in to dump 2,000 points on your
No,
little
I'm gonna
challenge.
look. I'm gonna roll perception on this one just to see. Let's look at your eyes when you say that. Yeah, Ange. Yeah. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. That's fine. That's the memories that'll be.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that.
That's Sunday. That's going to happen. I'm sure of it.
You've got pre-traumatic stress disorder. I think.
I'm going to have an earphone in with last night's like whatever podcast in my ear so that I can re-listen to it while I'm playing the game. Whatever we're playing on Saturday. What are we? That's a good point. What are we playing this week? What's on
I
the cards?
don't know.
Shall we look?
Ange, what are we playing? What are we playing this week?
Hang on.
Yeah. Something's happening.
Let's have a look at Infinite. So if you aren't already on Discord, I think everybody that's here is.
Yeah.
Everybody that here is probably.
Blades
here.
discussion off, right? Oh crap!
Let's see. Calendar. All right.
I mean, he's
so,
going
yeah.
to talk about stuff again.
Yeah. What day are we on?
And
16th?
it's
Mutants and Masterminds. Oh. Mutants and Masterminds. I didn't play the trailer. We can do that in the break.
yes. Have we been a break? Are we having a break?
I didn't know we were going to be here long
This
enough to
stream is
have
going to be
one.
about half an hour long. We'll have a break in the middle.
Yeah. Got to get the adverts in.
15 minutes in, break.
In fact, if this was American TV, there'd be a break right now.
Yes, yes,
Straight
I can
after.
vouch for that. What,
Straight
3 minutes in?
after
Go to
the-
commercial, man.
The title song had finished playing. Be in the commercial break.
And we'll be right back.
But we
After
can
these
we
short
can
messages.
do that. We are today talking about what I typed in as Crunchier Rules Light, which almost sounds like a chocolate commercial, but instead it's actually a bit longer than that, isn't it? The official title that we had for tonight is the pros and cons of crunchy games or Rules Light. So I'm not sure if are we supposed to pick one and talk about the pros and cons
I don't
of
know.
each?
I've got the feeling it'd be a comparison between the two.
I think so. I think
Or
that's
Yeah,
what do you what do you
Yeah.
prefer and why? Pros and cons.
because it was Angie that gave us these.
It was. Yeah. It
So-
was. But we never bothered to go, Ange, can you elaborate?
She's saying do weigh them up against each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The director.
Well, I'm going to say I come down firmly on the rules light side. of
I'm
things.
sorry, should I have not read that out?
Just do.
Just do.
Yeah. So,
rules light, is it?
yeah, well, for me it is. I prefer rules light system, and it's mainly because I can't be bothered to read lots of rules.
That's peculiar. But we'll come to why that's peculiar in just a
But
minute.
that's my age. I can't remember them. Mainly.
I see. I like rules light too because I like this. I like the story. I like the story and the immersion of being in the story and collaboratively telling the story. But yeah, so I would fall down onto rules light as well. Having said that, though, I do enjoy nerding out over rules, but not live on stream.
I get that because I'd like rule books. I like rule books. I can't think whether I prefer rule books with lots of lore in them and light rules or
Lots of pictures.
yeah, pictures is good.
So
Pictures are
Hale,
great.
What about you? Where do you fall on the crunchy or rules light matrix?
I think I'm going to straddle the fence here. Like, well, like you two, I do prefer the simplicity of a rules light system because the game keeps flowing. You know, you can focus on, as you say, the story. The issue comes when if you're not, shall we say, if you're not in the zone, if you have trouble improvising or doing things on the fly, then you get into a situation where there's not enough there in the rules with a rules light system to help you. The benefit of a crunchier type of game mechanic generally means there's lots of hand holding. There's a lot more complication, but there's a lot more hand holding there to tell you what to do, or this comes up, use this. This comes up, use this. This comes up, use that, and so on. So if you haven't been playing very long, or you're a bit of an introvert, you're not ready to go larger than life as a DM at least, I think those crunchier systems can really help you to overcome those hurdles. The problem with that is unless you're well versed in the rules, you're ready to go from day one, you've got everything grinds to a halt. You break out the books, you look everything up, and it's resolved fairly, but everything else comes to a screeching halt.
So, yeah, Kadari said something interesting at the end of the game that we played on Saturday, and I think it was Kadari. Basically, it was the concept of having a bunch of people sitting around a table where all of the players know the rules, know how to play the game, know how to be prepared for the rules that they have in that game, be it D&D or be it another game. And you were talking there about from a beginner's perspective. From a beginner's perspective, isn't it easier to have a rules light game? But what you were saying, and I agree with that, is it doesn't suit everybody. And I think that's an interesting point as well. The suitability of the player individually. So are we three sitting around just now looking at this? Do we really need an advocate for crunchy rules here? Because it seems like we've all...
Maybe we should have. We could have done with somebody else, couldn't we?
Trolls.
That actually is more. Yeah, I think I imagine Trolls is quite. I think he quite likes the rules, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think Trolls would be a good one to have to advocate for.
Yeah, but he's not here,
systems.
so light wins.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Trolls.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming.
Okay,
everybody.
so unanimous ruling. We're all in agreement. We win. Good night, folks.
The house moves. The house is victorious.
Yeah, TheInfinaty says he likes more rules. I mean, he's wrong, but we need to kind of dig into why he's wrong.
Well, he's also in chat. I mean,
so we can just go anyway,
couldn't be bothered to show up.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, what is it about rules that you like then, Infinity? Because I don't know. I figured you'd be more. I thought you'd be more improv, to be honest, mate. Okay, rules are there, but a DM needs to stretch them or not use. I mean, that's the other thing, isn't it? You can have a crunchy system and just throw out a load of the rules anyway. You can play it however you like.
D&D.
That's the kind of the thing, right? Everybody's got their own way of playing these games. I guess as a beginner, the problem is you come along and you see a rule book that's yay thick or whatever, and you think you've got to have, and you use all of those rules, and maybe it's not until you've got a bit more experience at playing games that you kind of think, I don't need to use that. It's like, how many people use encumbrance rules in D&D, for Christ's sakes?
Here's an example of some of the weighty tomes. Right, so here's the player's handbook for D&D. Right, that's the player's handbook.
We've been playing with that all this time?
That's the player's...
Mine's a bit smaller.
There's the player's handbook. Right, I've
been making do with the light edition.
There's the adventure. There's the adventure that we're playing on Mondays. So there's rules in there about boats and speed and all the rest of it. So there's extra rules in here to cover the maritime stuff. Here's the DM's guide,
which is a load of optional rules in it.
Which is a load of optional rules, right? That's the DM's guide. And then just to mix things up, you've got extra stuff that brings more rules and things in, like Xanathar's.
Okay. You see, yeah, there's a poll, right? More or less rules is better.
But personally, I don't think that book is nearly thick enough to have everything in it. I think you should ask for your money back.
What I think is something that despite the fact that we've got all those rules, what D&D does is the crunchiest game that I play is Scaffold. It's very well scaffolded. You learn what you need to know when you need to know it, and the game guides you, or at least hopefully you find a games master who is able to go through that process and take you through the rules. So when you start off with D&D, you download the SRD, and it's maybe a dozen pages or something, because that's all you need to know. And you don't need to get into that level of rules unless you're interested. Unless you want to look something up or you want that reference. And you don't need that immediately. So geeking out on rules allows you, from my mind, to prepare to improvise. Because if you need consistency and you want to treat everybody fairly and you want to treat all the players the same as a GM, you know that there's a rule that covers it. Whereas I've got a terrible memory. And if I say to Pale, well, that's a D10, and then I say to some old pirate for exactly the same thing, that's a D14. One of
Then
you is
that's
going
favoritism, and I hate you, and I quit.
So to advocate on the side of rules, they do help to iron out inconsistency and bias and unfairness. Now I'm playing devil's advocate at this point.
I know, I get that. I get that. Because, I mean, I suppose the argument there is, but what if it's not fun? What if it's okay, as somebody in a particular situation, you're making them roll or whatever? I mean, I guess you're talking about exact same situation, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's fun to have somebody fail at one point, but not fun to have somebody fail at another point doing exactly the same thing, and what do? I mean, you're just going to go with the rules and say, well, look at the draw, folks. It's a weird one. I mean, I guess I'm looking at it as not exactly the same situation, I suppose, which is...
Yeah. And if it was a board game, you would want that. You would want that consistency, because you'd want everybody around the board to have the same chance. And the rules provide the balance in order to let people to progress. But a tabletop role-playing game isn't about winning.
No.
So if the only reason for rules to exist is to allow a fair chance for everybody to win, you could argue that you don't need rules at all, because you're trying to tell a story.
Yeah.
Have I flipped that far too? Is that too much of a leap? Have I just logically jumped too far?
Yeah, have you talked us right out of a stream? Yeah, way to go. The rules are also there to serve as a means of measurement, which means sometimes failure works to the party's advantage, or at the very least, it ties in really well with the story, because I'll get you next time, you fiend, that sort of thing. So where all of a sudden you've got a player who's like maybe just going along with the flow, rolling dice and whatever, and that one roll or ruling, what have you, all of a sudden helps invest them in the story. It's like, all right, I'll be back next session and I'll show you what's what, kind of a thing. I think where we get into trouble is when the rules being absolute is like, oh, you didn't make it, you did. And something that's changed with D&D of late, I've seen, where all the optional material is coming out, is that it's not like when I used to play role-playing games. It's a lot harder to get yourself killed.
So
which is there good and bad.
Is there then a danger of equating the rules with peril? Like, every good story has to have conflict. You can't have a story without conflict.
Precisely.
So is it that you can still have peril without having heavy rules? So do we need rules to provide peril?
Well, no. I think we're looking at it wrong, maybe, because I mean, having to make a roll in a game or whatever, that doesn't make something crunchy, right?
No.
And it's the roles that probably bring jeopardy more than anything, because you have, there's uncertainty into how the situation is going to go. It's like, say, if we're looking at combat rules, because that's generally what where most of the rules for role-playing games kind of spend a lot of their time. Generally, the biggest chapters in a lot of the games, I think. It's how quickly, how many rules are required to resolve something like hitting somebody with a big stick. I mean, that's where you kind of maybe be looking at crunch. If it takes like one roll, the guy's dead or whatever. That's still kind of rules light, right? It's whether or not you're rolling to hit, rolling to see whether you get parried, roll to see whether it gets through the armor, then roll to see location or whatever. That's kind of crunchy,
That's
right?
crunchy,
As opposed to, right. So, which
you shoot him in the head.
Yeah. So I don't think it's a Jeopardy thing personally, because you can still get that on a single roll, right? In fact, maybe more so on a single roll than you could if you were having to work out. I'm looking at RuneQuest here. I don't know if anybody's familiar with RuneQuest and the maybe old school as well. I haven't seen
not for a long time, but I know what you're talking about.
Your strike ranks and your rolling to hit, rolling location, and all of that kind of stuff. That's crunchy, and way crunchier than, say, something like even D&D, which is fairly simple. The only problem, I don't think D&D is necessarily a rules heavy game. I find that the combats probably drag on because of the whole hit point situation and things like that. But it's not that the rules are complicated for that, is it?
So Infinity's come in with a couple of things. Let's just I'll quickly.
Yeah, but ignore him. He's wrong.
Jump. So he's saying more rules allow for a more complex system with more possibilities, but, and I think this is the crunch of his argument, keep it balanced. So it's the.
So you're arguing that more rules make it more balanced? Is that what we're saying,
yeah,
Andy?
I think. And a game with less rules like Connect 4 is not as good or challenging as a game with lots of rules like chess, which is superior in its strategy.
But that's a different thing. You wouldn't say that chess was rules heavy, would you?
No, it's still pretty light in terms of rules, but compared to drafts.
Yeah.
Angie says, if it's rules heavy, is it then not theatre of the mind? But I think you can have heavy rules. Theatre of the mind just means that people know what the rules are and they can play it out in their head, and they don't use maps. I think you can have a rules heavy game played out as theatre of the mind. And I think you can have a rules light game, which is also played out in theatre of the mind. I think rules light games lend themselves more to theatre of the mind because we are not machines and we don't tend to keep pages, like 150 pages of rules in our heads. So we need some sort of tool to help us.
Yeah, we need a bookshelf to hold all those.
But we don't need maps. We don't need figures. We don't need we don't need virtual tabletops. So those are the things that take it away from being theatre of the mind. So I'm not sure that I would say that.
I probably wouldn't necessarily think that was the case either myself.
Rules can help with jeopardy. But that comes back to what Pale was saying before about if you're not a role player and you don't know when or a writer or whatever, and you don't know when a story would benefit from some chaos or some danger or some conflict, then the rules can help you bring that point. I think that's what you were saying before, Pale, that kind of helps with that element of it.
Yeah, the rules in a cruncher type system are there for you to lean on or make a fair call on whether you're a new player, brand new, or you've been playing these types of games for years. There's it's there. You're not being arbitrary. The rules are laid out for you to make use of. So again, everyone's being treated fairly. It's just, again, having those rules in place is also like an ultimatum in some cases. and maybe that can tie your hands as a GM if you're like, well, you've used this rule before, or we've all been using this rule for whenever, and if the roll doesn't help, if it's a bad roll, well then you're stuck. Still, I mean, I guess you can face that same thing in a rules light situation, but maybe with a crunchier system, there's less wiggle room to get around it. So if someone, say, if one of your party members dies, if the rules are there to, shall we say, help overcome that system, which I guess is perhaps the point of a crunchier game mechanic to begin with, does a lighter system help you, well, not fudge it, but give that person a second chance, a means to get back into the story with as their same character, or are they forced to roll up somebody new and, maybe...
So what's a good example of a rules light campaign? Because we've played Cthulhu Dark, and it's pretty much lending itself to one
Yeah,
shots.
but everybody dies at the end.
It doesn't. It's not really suited for campaign play. No, definitely. Rules light. I guess Mothership. We've not played that yet. Mothership is pretty rules light, I would say.
And yet there's still things for called shots. There are criticals, both failures and successes. There's a thing, and even now, this is in the midst of being, shall we say, revised. There's a bunch of stuff that's been out, basically released online as from playtesters. So it's like it's a rules light system, and yet suddenly all these additional rules are coming out. So you got to wonder how is that happening? I mean, everyone's talked about loving it, and now all of a sudden there's being changes made.
Well, I guess no. I mean, it is rules light. It's pretty rules light, and I think it's part of that kind of whole OSR movement, I believe, which is kind of people kind of going back to earlier versions of systems like Dungeons and Dragons, like the original Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. And a lot of these kind of OSR systems are kind of based on that, and they tend to be very rules light, very dangerous for players as well. And Mothership definitely fits into that. And there's a whole bunch of new games that are coming out that I mean they're very small. They're almost like zines. A lot of these games as well, and things like Merkborg would be considered this OSR. It's the number of pages that are allocated to the rules. You can count them on one hand almost, and the rest of it is maybe just filler or setting. And that seems to be having a bit of a resurgence at the moment. Those kind of games, and Mothership kind of fits into this this kind of group as well. And when you're talking about they're adding rules in, it's not so much additional rules; it's just revising rules that are already there because they are maybe the thing about as you were saying about Mothership, it's basically a playtest document at the moment and.
Welcome, readers. Cheers, trolls.
Hey, trolls. Get in here. We need someone to defend Crunch. Because we're all rules light. And it's like, okay, show's over.
And so it's more a case of that the rules that are being they're not additions. I think they're revisions more than anything else in that. So I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Well, in fact, it's something you and I were discussing just last night.
Yeah. Let me jump back into chat and bring some actually what I'm going to do is jump over to Discord because Kadari is actually playing a game just now, but he asked as DMs, do we feel that crunchy systems hinder the narrative? Are we restricted by a rule set? And do you sometimes hand wave the rule set for narrative reasons? All the time. You've seen me DM, and if you know Dungeons and Dragons, you'll know the rules better than I do. But you'll know that my focus is on the story, and I don't want to stop the story, the role play, to refer to rules. I would rather make a decision there and then and review it afterwards, whether it was right or wrong. Go with that decision, but then learn that rule properly and implement it into the game the next time we hit that situation. And I would say, well, last time we did this, but I've since learned that this rule is, or if it's a really big one, I would say to the players before the game and say, look, I've learned this new rule. Can we use it? And have a discussion about it. So I don't feel restricted personally by a rule set, but there are times where I do, in the back of my mind, think, am I pushing it too far? Is this no longer Dungeons and Dragons? Are we playing a different game here? But then, does it matter?
No. I mean, I guess it doesn't. As long as everybody around the table is having fun and doesn't care, and there's no worry, right?
So are we?
You got
restricted?
that rule exactly right.
Are we restricted by rule sets?
I guess you shouldn't be. Because if it becomes not fun, then you shouldn't be using those rules, right? You should be ditching the rules that aren't fun for you. Encumbrance. Fuck off, encumbrance. Nobody likes you.
Go home, encumbrance, you're drunk.
But the interesting thing about that is the rules are made by a completely different group of people than any of the players around the table, unless you happen to be lucky enough to be playing with people that make the rules, which, that's chance in a million, right? So it allows other people to write different rules that are variants from your background. And is there not a sense that if you ignore too many rules, that you end up always playing the same game, irrespective of the actual original intention of the rule set author?
And you mentioned this the other night, and I honestly I thought I didn't get that, because once again, what does it matter if you're having a good time? If you don't enjoy certain rules, but you enjoy the rules from some other game, what difference does it make what rule set you're playing?
Yeah,
it doesn't matter as long as you're all playing from the same or singing from the same sheet. You're all having a good time.
This is where it's interesting, and I wonder if this is the streaming effect that's actually having that, making me think of that. If you are broadcasting a game, as we do, some of our games we don't, but some of the games we do, to an audience who would come along and expect there to be, and we've seen this in other streams, actual plays that we've watched, you get people who are so heavily focused on the rules that when a player, a GM, makes a mistake, they're in chat. And they're keyboard warriors. They're house rules or inconsistent application of a rule that they didn't do the same way last week. The players around the table are oblivious, hopefully, to that. But the chat is on fire because it was a 40-meter radius and not a 30 or something like that.
Yeah, we never read chat. I mean,
Yeah, fuck off, chat.
You and encumbrance can go blow.
So there is an element of that, isn't there? There's not. I think maybe there's an extra bit to that as well. When things do change when you're streaming, irrespective of everybody saying, "Oh yeah, we just sit around and play the normal game that we do," but then you've got chat who don't view it that way. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I guess.
That's a catch-22.
If they're kind of new, and they come along to see your D&D 5e stream or whatever, and you're playing some variant of your own rules that are so far removed that it's unrecognizable, then they're going to be pretty pissed off, I imagine.
I think there's folks out there who are already mad because we don't use encumbrance.
And
you guys just grow yourself. When you're broadcasting, you've got the new folks coming in. It's like, oh, this is what role playing's all about. It's terrific, and oh, this is great combat and everything else. And you've got those other folks going, that's not what the rule book says.
That's a weird thing.
Fireball, 30-foot radius. What's wrong with you people, etc., etc.
Do people then? Were they watching actual play? Now, I get it if you're watching an actual play because you're interested in a game and you want to see how it's played, and then you go along to somebody's stream and they're not playing that goddamn game. They're playing some other thing. That's kind of tricky. But do people go and watch actual plays, rules of a game?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, some of the big guys. Some of the big guys.
They do.
Right.
And that comes back down to the thing that we were talking about before, is that we as 3 players and GMs around the table will fall more to the rules light side because we're more story based. But for those who would defend crunchy rules, or at least without realizing are defending crunchy rules, because that's their view of that game. That's their game. They've spent that time, they've invested that time learning the rules and making sure that they've got a table around them when they play with the same kind of people, because that's fun for them. It's
And if you're not playing it that way, then you're wrong.
I hope they use the proper encumbrance rules in 5. Oh, I'm going to watch this stream. I can't wait. I can't wait to see how many items they're carrying. It's going to be amazing. He's
got 5 gold pieces in his pouch. Too many to pull that maneuver. It says right here.
Yeah, exactly right.
Really?
So yes.
Yeah, you live a sheltered life there, pirate. There's lots of folks out there who hold you accountable.
Okay,
at 5 gold pieces.
So let's jump back in. Let's back into chat, because I think we've missed out on a few guys. If you've just joined us, thanks very much, Trolls, for the raid. We're talking about the merits of crunchy rules versus rules light, and we're going to be going for about another 25 minutes. So quickly jump through. Commander Strain is with you on RuneQuest, by the way, so that's a good one. Bong likes the idea of flexible rules but also having complexity, so I think he's kind of sitting in the middle there, maybe.
Get off the fence.
Jade is definitely here for the story. Definitely, Jade loves the story and wants to be. I guess that's an element of the entertainment around the table.
We love you too, Jade.
Keeping it simple, get complicated when the shit gets real, says Bongmaster.
But doesn't that just slow things down? That's the other thing, right?
Doesn't it? In combat,
doesn't
in
it
D&D,
slow things down?
It really does, doesn't it? I bought a book that is about how to do fast combat in D&D. I haven't read it yet, but I'm gonna, because it's really interesting. It's a subject. Just the title's enough. One of the things it did suggest was count how much time people in a round of the combat game with crunchy rules spend contemplating their actions versus actually narrating their actions and the GM's response, and measure that over the period. And I thought, well, that in itself is quite interesting. And that comes back to the point of, I think Kadari made again to me, was that when you get players around the table who know the crunchy rules, it then becomes like jazz is complicated, but people that know the rules of that particular musical type will be able to improvise around it and play really complex stuff as if it's fluid. And so the crunchy rules comes down to the player's ability to operate within them accurately. Is that maybe is that an ego thing, perhaps?
I don't know. I don't. Although, so carry on, Eric.
Well, I was just going to say I've enjoyed the Saturday D&D game for precisely the reason that it's not adhering specifically to so many rules. Because how many times, as my artificer, you've said, "And what are you doing this round?" And I'm like, "Oh my God! I mean, how many choices have I got? Is that a half action? Is that a full action? Is that am I holding my action? Is that a free action?" I mean, I am literally overwhelmed by choices and not knowing the rule set to say, like, okay, this is this. This is this is what I do. And that's on me as a player, because I haven't played, D&D for so long, and now we're in 5e. So that's on me as a player, and yet I think you as a DM are making it as easy as possible for me to try and do something helpful, constructive, even it means like,
Cool
okay,
or
we'll
fun,
skip
yeah.
you and we'll
Yeah.
come back.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the rules don't allow for that, and yet that's what you're doing.
Yeah,
Is to give me the time to figure
Yeah,
out what the hell it is.
Angie's with you on that one. She says she gets confused by rules and dice rolls. But Infinity said that Mutants and Masterminds is an example where heavy rules work because ultimately any power, but rules allow somebody basically just punch in their fist. It's not unbalanced with a person who can create a black hole. So anybody can punch anything, but only some people. I don't know enough about Mutants and Mastermind to comment whether it's rules light or rules heavy. But Infinity says it's rules heavy, and
I don't think it is, because it's not like it's using it. It's not kind of looking at superpowers and then going into the minutiae and having a separate rule for every single superpower, is it? That would be rules heavy.
Mm. Mm. So
No,
yeah.
it's not.
And now we bring you to part of the show where yes, it is. No, it's not.
Bong is bringing up digital shades as rules light, and I think you've mentioned that's only like one page or something, isn't it? It's like one side of A4.
What's that?
Right?
Sorry.
Digital shades.
Oh yeah. What they I think it's like two sides of A4, isn't it? Digital.
Right.
Yeah, and it looks kind of groovy, that does. But then those these one-page RPGs look kind of cool.
So Infinity's coming back to balance. The rules need to help the balance of classes and abilities. So the more options that you want in a game, the more rules that you need. Does that come to is that experience? And I'm not making any judgment of anybody's experience, but is it easier when you have more experience to? Again, does it come down to see, we're going back round, and again we've flipped back round, aren't we? Is it storytelling, or is it combat and outcome, game outcome, gamified outcome? Is it the levels that you get? Is it the loot that you receive? Is it the tables that the gold that you accrue, the experience points that you gain? If those are the focus, then yes, it probably does benefit in the way that the Infinity is saying, because everybody needs a fair chance to get the same amount of experience, or the same amount of wealth, or the same amount of gear. Whereas if
I mean, what is? Am I reading this right? So complexity equals game balance. Is that what we're saying? Because I don't agree with that.
If the game is getting experience points, leveling up, defeating hit point, crunching down the hit points, if that's the aim of the game, then the rules help to keep that balanced and fair for everybody. And the more options that you have, the more complex the rules get. I think at Infinity I've got that right.
I don't know if I'd agree with that. And when I think about something like Blades in the Dark, for example.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up.
That's pretty rules light, yeah?
Yep.
Aha. And yet
it allows you to do anything that you want in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's narrative as opposed to relying on to hit rolls and things like that. It's a much more narrative kind of game,
and that's why I love it so much.
And I think that's the deal.
And yet, my turn to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
Whoever is running the game master, because I forget what the specific word is used for the.
They called GM.
Oh, okay then. The GM in the Blades game, from everything I've read and seen so far, never rolls anything. So it's up to the players. Players have roles, and stats and whatnot.
There are roles.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there is a system there, but it's a narrative system, and it's not relying on like a war of attrition for hit points or anything like that. You just state I mean, the closest thing you're going to get is like a progress clock or whatever, which counts down and ticks down depending on the level of success that you achieve. You basically just describe what it is you're going to do, and then you decide what ability you're using to do that with, and you roll a couple of dice. And depending on the highest dice that you roll, you do something cool or you fuck something up monumentally.
Yeah, and that's when, the GM says that, well, this happens, and then says, well, this happens, and then says, well, this happens. I mean, it's arbitrary.
Blades is a wee bit different from that, isn't it? In how the
and I'm just is Infinity's comment there? Yeah, but ultimately you are all a human, and the class types are not that different. Are you talking about Blades in the Dark there, Mr. Infinity?
Well, there is a set of pages that are dedicated to the different class types, and if you had more class types, and if you had more class types, then you would have more pages to cover for those. But that doesn't necessarily make it crunchy. And I think Trolls, I'd like to bring, because we did Trolls to bring up your point about Drakarok Demoner. The idea was at the beginning we said we needed an advocate for rules, because we recognised between the three of us that we were on the side of the narrative style. I and Pale were probably somewhat on the fence. I like geeking out after the fact over rule books. That's why I pulled out a ton of D&D paper, and it is good. And I do sit there when I'm in the mood, when the mood takes me. We also discussed that it takes all sorts, and we're not saying that we are entirely representative of Infinite Monkey Tales as a direction or as that. We know, and I've been trying to argue for rules, as it has Infinity, that we know that there are players who are more accustomed, enjoy that knowledge of the rules, that acquisition of rules, and the expression of those rules. And we know that we know that there are players there. So it would be entirely remiss of Infinite Monkey Tales to ignore or otherwise try to deflect anybody who played those types of games from us. It's just that at the moment we've an entirely one-sided conversation. But it's not our intent to say that rules light versus crunchy rules is somehow a side of right or wrong.
God, no, you play what you like.
You play what is. That's it. But
that's amazing.
So we're and that's what we're coming round to. But I wanted to bring that in because it might just seem like we're ragging a bit on heavy, which we are. That's just because that's where we all come from. Yeah. It's just that we don't have.
It's not deliberate. It just works out that way.
No, I mean, it's one of those things. I don't think I'd want to play a game that didn't have any rules. I mean, I think as rules light as I get is Cthulhu Dark. I mean, and admittedly, there is very little to that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, the one rule is at the end of the game, you're dead.
To have no rules at all would, that would be no fun, I think. Personally, so it's not like I don't like rules or anything like that, because to a degree you need to roll dice, right? For Jeopardy, that's cool, or play cards or whatever it is you do in your particular brand. But
so there's definitely a little bit of fun to be had from some rules to help guide, and for other people, as Pale alluded to and we've talked a bit about as well, the idea of there almost being not one or the other, but a spectrum. Like everybody enjoys a certain amount. Everybody will be able to, everybody will be able to go one way or the other. That's a question then. If you, Mark, if you wouldn't like a very rules-heavy game, would somebody who plays a very rules-heavy game as a rule, as a norm, would they like something like Cthulhu Dark, which has a page of A4 or whatever it is, or 2 pages?
And this is, it kind of depends what their expectation is, I suppose. That's what that would boil down to, right? In terms of a Pathfinder player doesn't necessarily go along to a Cthulhu Dark game and figure that the rules are going to be like Pathfinder, do they?
Mm.
There's the level of expectation there. And I imagine that's subjective again, right? Because does everybody just like rules heavy games? I don't know.
Most of games of Dungeons and Dragons that are played are not played at the high end of the level spectrum where the rules are the crunchiest. The rules at level 15 to 20 are insane. Battles can take the spells that people have, the counter effects of spells, overlaying each other, the decisions that are taken. People tend to shy away from that side of things, and there's stats to support this in terms of like Roll20 in the games that they're playing and the levels that people are, and I think D&D Beyond have released similar stats as well, and it all kind of points to the fact that the crunchiest parts of a game like D&D are at the end, and more often than not, people will not get their campaign to that stage. And then you look at the games that are really popular. The second most popular game is Call of Cthulhu on Roll20. And you said in Japan as well. It's the most popular in Japan.
The most popular RPG in Japan, I believe. Yeah,
big in Japan. Is Call of Cthulhu crunchy?
I'm gonna go with it's medium crunchy. It's like D&D. D&D is not a crunchy game, right?
Okay, right.
We talk about chips.
It's not a crunchy.
Doesn't cheese poof count as crunchy?
Yeah, and which is probably why I prefer Trail of Cthulhu over Call of Cthulhu, because I think Trail is lighter in rules, and so I would have said, it's kind of a similar level to D&D. I would have said.
Yeah. So it gets. I mean, D&D does get crunchier the further up levels you go, because there's more impact of rules and more impact of spells.
So are we saying then that everything starts out rules light and then becomes crunchier as it goes on? I mean, is that the direction that the game industry is taking as far as overall IPs?
Yeah, that comes down to the level, the game design. If you have a crunchy system, you don't want to drop that on players immediately. Otherwise, you will lose players because they're overwhelmed. So a good system builds up to that, so that by the time you've got to the bits that are really complicated, you've got all the other stuff down pat. So if the game that Trolls was talking about is crunchy, then it shouldn't matter, because the early stages introduce you to just the bits you need to do those early stages, and as you get further and further and deeper into the game, I don't know the game, so I can't, but I would hope that's the way, because to me that's indicative of good design of crunchy games. Same,
5e works. It does very well with that. I think we've had this discussion with somebody before, probably on Discord, I think it was. Because at level 1, you don't have a whole lot to think about as any of the character types, but it does each level, or several levels that you go through in D&D, introduces another aspect of that particular class, which makes it a little bit more complicated. But you already know the other stuff, so it builds up quite well as you level. And I think the progression is pretty good for something like 5e. RuneQuest, I don't think something like RuneQuest has that same. Is it a level-based thing then? Maybe when you have games that are level-based, that you have that
experience grind
progression. Yeah.
Trolls has brought up armor class and THAC0 to hit armor class 0.
I love THAC0.
So that might be a good example.
Here we go.
That might be a good example of where D&D has learned to be more accessible by making.
What was that about? What was that all about?
I played it. I can't remember. It was too long ago.
I just remember having to draw a goddamn grid on the character sheet.
There was a lot of math.
Yeah, why?
These hooligans would throw it all away for the rules. Yeah, we speed up fights. Crunchy rules. So Trolls is saying crunchy rules doesn't have to hinder RP or combat, but they do if you're totally new to them. And I think I think so. Once you learn the rules, and maybe that's some of the appeal. Maybe some of the appeal of crunchy rules is just because they are crunchy rules, and that's a challenge in itself to learn those rules, but then to express the RP and the combat fluently,
or use them in a
those.
clever manner to
Right. Yep.
defeat an opponent or what have you.
Yep. And
Do you ever wonder how many of all of these optional rules and materials for D&D, as an example, probably came out from all the weird things people at first and second level were trying to stay alive? Okay, you got 3 hit points and the kobold stabs you. Oh, God!
So here's an
So I grab
one.
this thing and I whip another kobold in the way, and I'm just that sort of stuff.
Welcome to Abarash Kampachi. I like heavy rules and loose rules, but DM players must be concise. So irrespective of the system, for either being flexible enough to play in either a rules light, the players have to be concise. And I think that's an interesting point, because we touch upon the time it takes to have a turn in D&D in combat as being a long thing, but is it the rules? Is it the knowledge of the rules? Is it the player making a decision and not making a decision and going back on a decision? Does that happen as much in rules light games? Do the rules light have people changing their mind, or is it do people just crack on with it and just make a decision and stick with it because it's the story and not the how many hit points you reduce or how many experience points you're going to get by doing it one way or another?
Now, in a situation, are we talking about rules light games, or are we talking about narrative games? I think.
Well,
that's kind of.
I think that's the point that
be...
Kampachi's making there is it's up to the players to make either of those situations work well. And the focus is on the players. So whether or not you're around the table with people, if you're playing the rules, I'm kind of extending this, but if you're taking a rules heavy game and you're playing it with new players, which is something that Trolls has said, then it's always going to be slow. Whereas if you're playing it with experienced people who are able to be concise with those rules, then it shouldn't slow it down, which I think is...
or does it just mean that it's not as slow?
I think it does. I think those extra rules do slow things down just because... Yeah, I mean, you've got someone who knows their stuff. They're in a combat situation. I do this, and it's all by the rules. Then you've got to resolve those skill checks and what have you. So there's action and reaction. And so even the DM knows all that stuff and right, okay, roll this and roll for that. And okay, damage taken, spell effect. Okay, that's your turn. You're next. And with a large number of folks, rules crunchy, and I think it's going to bog down regardless. I think it also happens in rules light. It's just the argument is without all that additional material to sort through for each person's turn, I think the game just goes quicker, being the nature of the beast.
Trolls is coming saying that if you want fast combat, then just play a champion fighter. So yeah, it's a difficult one. We are getting to the close of the time. So I think
let's just take a break.
It's probably a good time to begin to sum up. Where are we? Let me just quickly scroll.
I don't know that we managed to accomplish anything.
I think we established rules light is great and everybody else is wrong. I think that's where we went. That's where we got right.
So and I think
I don't need any hate mail on Discord. Thanks.
Yeah. So rules also make it so some players can hog all the attention and doing 20 things while other players who are conservative only telling one action. And
what was that? Sorry,
Kampachi. making it. We've got 2 minutes to sum up. I'm just trying to bring a rules heavy argument in against the rules light one. So I'm just quickly. So I think players and GMs. I think everybody agrees on this. If you have a group of players, including the GM, around the table, and everybody's having fun, it does not matter. It doesn't matter because everybody is winning at that point. Because you're going there, you're coming back week after week, you're enjoying each other's company, you're having a good time, whatever that is, whatever style it is. Sometimes you're not at the right table, because maybe you don't like rules light stuff and you want a crunchy game, so you have to go and look for a crunchy game. But if you're going back time and time again and you're having fun and you're enjoying the company of all the people around the table, it doesn't matter what system you're playing. So I hope everybody can agree with that. If you're having fun, does it matter? I think I would we're meant to have fun. If we're having fun, does it matter? It doesn't matter at all. Would be my way of looking at that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's 100% right there. We don't even have to do a poll on that.
Well, we gotta end on a high note, though.
I forgot that Infinity was in here.
Yeah.
And trolls.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to the end. We've got the end of an hour, and we're no further forward. But we have had a very interesting discussion, and we know and freely admit that this table, this house that you see around, the three of us are all very much falling into the favour of the narrative game, which
totally biased.
More straightforwardly lends itself to rules light systems, and that's because we're allowed to spend more time, I think, thinking about our characters, and not having to have that extra layer of thinking about the rules and our characters. So, yeah, maybe it's easier.
That I think is a huge pin or feather in the cap for rules light systems.
Yeah.
When you can spend more time focusing on the story, on your players / characters, and where the campaign is going, versus I've got this encounter, I've got these bad guys. They've all got these various skills. I have to make sure all these are fair. What does the party have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then you reach the point, it's like, wow, this is work, as opposed to this is going to be great fun. And which I think is the end result we're all shooting for, light or crunchy.
I think I like Matt's summation. Either way, two things happen when the Infinite Monkey Tales get around the table. We either start a fight in a 100% peaceful situation with no provocation, or
you take that back,
or Angie will be defeated by a door.
And on that note, good night, folks.
Yeah, I think so. Guys, thank you so much. I'm sorry we haven't got to all of it. We are going to be having more of these roundtables. If you've enjoyed it, please hit the follow button. And if you'd like to come and sit, we are open. We get more people around. We've got more topics coming up.
Otherwise, it's just going to be as biased as this one.
It's going to be just as biased as this one. We freely admit our bias. We did try and stick some devil's advocation in there, and probably managed a little bit.
I got your crunch.
Yeah, so we're gonna have another one of these. We don't know when the next one is in right now, but if you jump into Discord, if you aren't already in our Discord, please do jump in.
Actually, even suggest topics.
Suggest topics.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Suggest some goddamn things we can talk about.
In InfinatyKeen,
here,
put a suggestion box.
And we can tell you why
Discord,
you're
if you would, please.
Bong. We have been talking about these in our schedule, so they've been on the schedule. Check the calendar. Go to calendar, in Discord. Check the calendar one. All of these are listed as, I think, 4 weeks in advance. It's about a month in advance.
And she's been trying to do it like a month in advance.
Yeah.
But we haven't. This is the first one that we've ever done, and I think none of us kind of really knew how it was going to go or what we were going to. But as it happened, thank you to Angie Pops for all the work behind the scenes, getting scheduling and all that sorted. Very much thank you for that. Thank you to Infinity for productions as well. And thanks to Trolls. It's too late for Trolls. Yeah, we could start Trolls.
It's
We will.
too late for you, man. We're going to save
start.
ourselves.
We will start another one, and we'll start it earlier. Thanks to Pale, and thanks to Some Old Pirate, and I've been Croy. It's been a pleasure. We'll be back for another one. Check into Discord, and we'll see you again very soon. Cheerio, everybody. Bye-bye.
Night, guys.